Right, good evening members. Welcome to the Development Committee of Rochford District Council on the 22nd of October 2020. First of all, apologies for absence. They've been received from Councillor Mr Shaw, who has been substituted for by Councillor Gooding, and from Councillor Mrs Weston, who's been substituted by Councillor Steptoe. So that covers 1 and 2. Non-members attending, I've noted Councillors Wilkinson, Rowe, Wotton, Sperring and Dray. I think that's all of you. Yeah, thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of September 2020. I will assume that you are happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record, unless you indicate by showing your hand. I'll just wait a moment. Thank you. I have no indication, so in due course those will be signed. Item 5 is to receive declarations of interest. We have Councillor Steptoe first.
Thank you, Chairman. With reference to item 6, I'm a member of the Essex County Council.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to note that I'm a member of Rayleigh Town Council.
Thank you. Councillor Dray.
Thank you, Chairman. Items 6, 7 and 8 as a member of Rayleigh Town Council, although I'm not on the planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sperring. You need to unmute, please. Try again, Councillor Sperring. We missed it.
Sorry, Chairman. Again, a member of Rayleigh Town Council, but not a member of this committee.
Thank you. Right, okay, thank you very much. So we move on to item 6, which is land to the rear of 98 and 128 High Street, Rayleigh. Again, there is information about this application on the addendum, so please make sure you refer to that. And I think Katie Rogers is going to present on this one, please.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen with you. So hopefully on screen you can see the location plan. So members, this application is for redevelopment of the former Dairy Crest site. The site is a backland site accessed between buildings fronting the High Street in Rayleigh Town Centre. The site borders a library to the west, an area of the playing field associated with a school, the garden and site of a residential dwelling number 7A, Crown Hill, and to the east, the site borders a car park associated with a commercial premises. On screen now is the layout plan. So 2 buildings are proposed, which would be positioned either side of a central open space. 2 commercial units are proposed, 1 in each building at ground floor, and they would be positioned here and here, either side of the central access. Otherwise, the buildings will be in residential use. This is a revised proposal following refusal of a previous scheme on 4 grounds, which the applicant has sought to address. In respect of the previous reason for refusal relating to inadequate car parking provision, the scheme would now ensure that all spaces would meet the preferred base size of 2.9 by 5.5, and the spaces will be provided in a court here, 3 spaces in the central area here, and then some adjacent to part of the southern boundary. At least 1 parking space per flat will be provided and 1 space for each of the commercial units. And this level of on-site provision in this town centre location, which has good access to public transport, is considered acceptable. There was also a reason for refusal of the previous scheme relating to air quality. Let's take you to this plan here. I'm going to take you down a bit. So the plan on screen you can see is the plan associated with the air quality management area order. And my arrow is now pointing, hopefully you can see that, about centrally, to the small bit of building within the site, which is within this red line. So as part of the site is within this area, the whole site is regarded as being subject to this order. However, other than at this location, the air quality management area is only one building deep off the high street along its full extent, or off the other roads that are associated with this order. Members will note on the addendum that a further consultation response has been received regarding air quality, with confirmation that the inclusion of this small section of the Dairy Crest site within the air quality management area boundary is anomalous, and that the proposed residential flats would not be subject to poor air quality given the setback from the high street. The flats would be shielded from vehicles using high street, and taking account of the rapid drop-off of pollution with distance, this site should not be considered at risk of poor air quality. The development would, just go back to the layout plan, so it would give rise to additional vehicle movements onto High Street and therefore within the air quality management area. And the applicant has proposed mitigation by way of the installation of electric vehicle charging points. I'm just going to zoom in to this plan here, just to show you on the plan. Just in one area of the site at least. So these 6, they're not all shown here because some are to the other parking spaces, but they're denoted with these red dots here. All the other bays will be future-proof to enable installation of further equipment at a later date without the need for major groundworks. Members also raised concern with the previous scheme with regard to the appropriateness of the proposed vehicular and pedestrian access to the site. I'm just going to move that layout plan around so you can see the access off High Street. Changes to the proposed layout, so in this area where my cursor is here, in particular, would discourage parking on the access road that leads to the turning head, because people wouldn't generally park blocking in a designated bay. Refuse and delivery vehicles would therefore have the ability to enter and exit the site in forward gear. Following further discussion with the applicant, the recommendation would now remove condition 17 and incorporate this requirement to resurface this access for the whole of this area here and here into a legal agreement with 2 heads of terms. And these would be a requirement for resurfacing of the vehicular and pedestrian access to the site beyond the adopted highway, which is approximately here, in accordance with details to have been submitted and agreed to the local planning authority. And these details are to include delineation of the footway in a different surfacing material or colour along this extent here. And the resurfacing will be required to be carried out prior to first occupation at the site. In addition, a requirement will be included for a parking management strategy to discourage parking on the access of the site, particularly in this area here. And again, this would be required to be implemented prior to first occupation. If members were to resolve to grant planning permission for this application tonight, the section 106 would have to be signed before any planning consent were issued. And the inclusion of these requirements in the 106 would secure the delivery of an appropriate pedestrian and vehicle access to the site. Just going to zoom out on this plan a bit and move it up. So concern was also raised in relation to the previous scheme with regard to the impact on the residential amenity of this dwelling here, number 7A, Crown Hill. And the previous scheme proposed a U-shaped building which had a wall which extended right along the boundary, adjacent to the boundary with 7A. The revised proposal for 2 separate buildings would reduce the extent of built form and create this break in the built form in the centre of the site. The scale of the building closest to 7A would now be 2-storey, as would this part of this other building, which is adjacent to the boundary with this residential property. I'm going to take you to this is the first floor plan. It's also sort of facing northwards, so my cursor is in the position where the garden of 7A extends adjacent to the boundary. So windows are proposed to the first floor in the side elevation of both buildings, which would face this boundary. And the plan on screen shows these windows. So here and here, here and here, and there. And they serve a lounge, sort of kitchen shared space. All of these windows would be required to be obscure glazed and fixed shut below 1.7 metres from finished floor level. So whilst these windows would let in light, they would not give rise to potential for overlooking and loss of privacy to 7A. And the same obscure glazing requirement would be imposed on the second story element, which would only be this part here, which is adjacent to the boundary with the school playing field. This balcony here, so in this first floor, will be provided with a louvre detail across its full width, which would prevent overlooking towards number 7A. And other balconies so here where my cursor is and here on the other building would be orientated such as not to give direct views over to the private garden area of this neighbouring property. Sorry, let me just take you to the elevations. So on screen are the elevations of the building proposed to the eastern part of the application site. When it pops back on screen, the elevation in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen here is that which would be adjacent to the rear of number 7A. And the existing boundary wall would obscure the ground floor windows. It would be these first floor windows that would be visible, and they would all be obscure glazed and fixed shut above the 1.7 metre height. Oh, apologies, I'm going to take you to the section plan now. So this is a section through the site, and the one at the bottom of the screen is section AA. So that's taken here where my cursor is. So you can see the dwelling 7A in the left-hand side, and then it's across the site. So it does show that the closest part is now 2-storey. And again, there's another section. So the next section is BB, so that other one. And this section is taken through the 3-storey part of the other building, but it's this 3-storey part would not be adjacent to the boundary with this neighbouring property that would be adjacent to the school playing field. I'm going to show you this photo on screen is the side elevation of number 7A and the area of rear garden between the rear elevation and the existing boundary wall. And beyond that, it's the 2-storey part of the proposed building which would be visible directly. The next photograph is just turning in the other direction to show this in this area where my cursor is here. There would be the 2-storey element to the other building proposed, and then beyond that it would rise to 3-storey. The elevation plans on screen are of the proposed building, which will be sited towards the western, sorry, it will pop back in a minute, western part of the site. Concern was raised in relation to the previous scheme regarding the appropriateness of the design and form in relation to the context of the site, partly within and otherwise immediately adjacent to the conservation area. The design and form of the proposal has changed significantly. The pitched roof form with gable ends would now reflect the traditional vernacular, and nearby buildings noted to be of design merit adjacent to the site and fronting the high street. I'll show you an image that the applicant has submitted. So this image is provided to aid in understanding how the proposed development would be viewed in relation to the existing nearby buildings in the conservation area within the high street. And you'll see the image in the bottom right-hand corner here is how the buildings to the western side of the site will be viewed down the existing access. Following publication of the addendum, the Lead Local Flood Authority have confirmed that they're happy to recommend planning conditions in relation to surface water drainage, satisfied that an appropriate surface water drainage scheme can be provided. In addition, I can confirm that the payment towards mitigation relating to protection of ecologically sensitive coastal areas of the district has now been made. In conclusion then, the scheme has been amended significantly from that previously considered and refused. It is considered that the revisions have addressed previous concerns, and the recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to the heads of term of Section 106 legal agreement as detailed in my presentation, including the omission of condition 17, and subject to the amended condition as detailed on the addendum. The surface water drainage conditions indicated in the published report as heads of conditions would be those as per the consultation response now received from the Lead Local Flood Authority. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 statements to be read out before we get to our discussion. The first is from Mr. Glyn Friend, who is the agent. Sonia, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So, statement from Mr. Glyn Friend, the planning agent. Thank you for reviewing this scheme at committee tonight and listening to this statement. Since the previous application that was seen by the committee in December of last year, 2019, we have worked closely with Rochford District Council Planning Department to develop the revised scheme you see before you here tonight. We have taken on board comments raised at the previous Development Committee meeting and held 2 consultation evenings inviting councillors and residents to drop by and comment on the proposals to take the scheme forward. Based on both comments from the above and working closely with the council, we went back to the drawing board and redesigned the scheme from first principles. The key issues that have been addressed are as follows. We've addressed the number of units on site and reduced this to initially 26 units. This allowed us to accommodate the correct number of parking spaces on the site, providing 1 space for every residential unit, together with 1 space each for the commercial units and several for visitors. Looked at the design of each block and used the existing site, surrounding buildings, in the high street and use of traditional materials to inform the visual character of the proposed buildings. Proposed materials are similar brickwork to that predominantly found on the site, integrated with elements of painted timber cladding and render as can be found locally, finished with pitched tiled roofs. This has all been brought together to echo the surroundings in a contemporary manner. Ensured that the refuse vehicle will be able to gain access to the site and turn within the site to exit in a forward gear whilst addressing pedestrian safety into and out of the site. Ensured that principles sought by Essex County Council People Places team were still integrated into the scheme. There is a key focal point within the scheme that is visible from the High Street, with a strong landscape scheme enhancing the development and helping form a sense of place. Security is being considered, with the buildings themselves helping to provide self-surveillance of the external areas and car parking, with a view to comply with secured by design standards. Address concerns from neighbours to ensure overlooking has been designed out of the scheme, notably towards 7A Crown Hill. We now have a scheme that has 24 residential units, reduced by a further 2. We have parking bays to the preferred Essex County Council sizes being 2.9 times 5.5 metres. Every apartment has 1 space. Both commercial units have 1 space and there is a couple of spaces left over for visitors. It is intended that during the day, the spaces towards the northeast of the site, adjacent to the gym, could be used by visitors during certain times of the day when the spaces could be left vacant by residents and visitors. We've also developed the design to incorporate physical features that will address any potential overlooking of 7A Crown Hill, whilst also picking up on comments raised by Essex County Council Places for People team and incorporating more soft landscaping and green features into the fabric of the buildings themselves. The new scheme has green credentials at its core. Within the car parking areas, we're providing 12 spaces with access to electric car charging points from the point the development will be ready for occupation. Every space in the car park will be future-proofed and have the infrastructure in place to provide electric car charging if needed. The whole development is intended to be serviced by electric only. No introduction of gas boilers is intended. To supplement the electrical requirements, photovoltaic cells have been allowed for on the roof. The reduction in units, reduced parking, encouragement for use of electric cars and the avoidance of fossil fuel boilers on site all help to address the concerns raised about the impact of the air quality management zone Added to this, the additional landscape features of which help to catch and filtrate airborne particulate will all address the air quality within the vicinity of the site. In summary, we hope you can see the efforts put in by the design team and planning officers to come up with a design that is a positive move forward that addresses all of the previous concerns and reasons for refusal. The scheme is now stronger, greener, and will provide a positive contribution to the town, and as such hope that you can support this scheme that will provide much needed 1 and 2 bedroom properties in a sought after town centre location. Thank you.
Thank you. And we go straight on to the second statement from Mr. Russell Brown as an objection.
Thank you. This development would be severely detrimental to our home. It would cause significant loss of light and privacy. During the winter, it will block out most of the morning sunlight. It is just as overbearing as the previous proposal and causes a comparable amount of overshadowing. This severe overshadowing is one of the grounds on which the previous proposal was refused. I'm going to explain why this development produces such bad overshadowing. It's due to its proximity, height and location. Firstly, it's very close, located directly behind the current boundary wall. Secondly, it's very high. Our property stands on land 1.5 metres lower than the Dairy Crest site. During the winter, an extra 1.5 metres in height causes more than 3 extra metres of shadow, even at noon. Thirdly, the building is located directly to the south-east. It is almost ideally placed to block out as much of the morning sun as possible. The current proposal has changed in several ways from the previous proposal. However, the way it affects our home has not changed significantly. Previously, the closest part of the building was 2 and 3 stories high with flat roofs. In the current proposal, the whole of the closest part is 2 stories high with a pitched roof. So, although one part of the proposal has been lowered, another part has been raised due to the pitched roof. What kind of effect will a building of this size and location have upon our property? The architect's sun path analysis diagrams are incorrect and unhelpful. They place the new building in a different position from their other plans, pushing it further away from our house. Their diagrams don't take into account the height difference between the 2 sites. They show the light at dawn and noon, but nothing in between. I would like to show a more representative diagram, which hopefully you can see on screen. This shows the shadows cast by Block B of the development on the 6th of November at 10:30 a.m. The date has been chosen as the midpoint between the equinox and the winter solstice. For 3 months of the year, the shadows will be worse than shown here. The shadows at this time of day will still block light to most of the lower windows. The shadows almost totally cover the back garden and reach as far as the windows upstairs. The diagram clearly shows that the overshadowing of the house continues well into the morning. Again, for 3 months of the year, the shadows will be longer than this. Overall, I believe the overshadowing produced will be similar to the unreasonable overshadowing which caused the previous proposal to be rejected. As well as our light, our other amenity would be significantly reduced by this proposal. Most of the view of the sky from the rear of our house will be replaced with a view of a building 20 metres long and 14 metres high. For reference, the current wall is 4.5 metres high. We would also lose the warmth of the sun and the privacy at the rear of our home, which is currently not overlooked. There have been attempts to reduce the overlooking produced by this proposal, but serious problems remain. For example, 3 rooms at the rear of our home will have views of the balconies on the northeast face of the building. Someone standing on the closest balcony will be able to turn their head and look down into a bedroom or the kitchen. We're also concerned about flooding. Land near to the site is often saturated due to the higher water table. Any extra water allowed to run off into the ground will almost certainly make this worse. Our home, together with other houses on Crown Hill and half of the dairy site, are all part of the conservation area. The residential buildings within the conservation area on Crown Hill are smaller than the buildings on the High Street. The two areas are currently separated by low-rise backlands, typical of the historic structure of the town. Placing large buildings on this land breaks up the separation between the High Street and the lower density residential area on Crown Hill. Therefore, this development represents a major change in the character of the conservation area. In summary, the proposed development is too big and too close. It will be severely detrimental to our amenity, significantly reducing the light and privacy at the rear of our home. It will negatively affect the character of the conservation area. It will cause unreasonable overshadowing, equivalent to that caused by the previous proposal. For these reasons, I believe the application be refused. Thank you for listening to my statement.
Thank you. Could you unshare your screen now, please, Katie? Thank you. Have Councillor Wilkinson first.
Thank you, Chair. With the respect, can I ask Katie to reshare what she's just had on the screen, Chairman, with your permission, because I wanted to make reference to it. That's okay.
That particular
document that was there, yeah. Chairman, members, I'm here this evening, and I'm going to concentrate on the occupants of number 7A and the impact of this development on 7A. That's really primarily why I'm here. I think it's important to address, first of all, or to note, first of all, that not only has the developer, but the officers as well have really made great attempts to try and rectify all the issues that were present at the last hearing and the reasons for refusal. However, and my submission to you will be that because of the issues raised by Mr. Brown in respect of 7A, I don't think it's gone far enough. Those of you who were present with me and Katie and several others at the beginning of August at the site visit will remember what the weather was like then. It was a lovely hot summer's day. We were all dressed for the beach. And after we left the site, we went round the corner to the back garden of number 7A. We've seen the photographs that Katie showed us. And I'm sure that you remember the large 1.5 metre concrete plinth on which that wall sits. It's a slight, if you haven't seen it in person, that photograph sort of gives it away a little bit, that it looks like the wall is higher than it is. It's actually a normal size wall, single size wall on a 1.5 metre plinth. Now, I don't know if you remember, Devon, the ground at that time was sodden. It was quite wet. The patio area, and this is why I wanted this diagram up. If you look at the shaded area there, and you can see where it says 7A, and there's a little dog leg that sticks out. That dog leg, and just to the left of that is where their back door is, and there's a very large patio area there. And I don't know if members remember that. We all congregated on there, and there was a table, and Mrs. Brown put some drinks out for us. The patio was absolutely covered in moss. It was damp and covered in moss, and that was on an August day, a hot August day. Now, the reason for the water issues in that property are when that property was built, the ground had to be excavated to level the land, thereby taking it the 1.5 metres lower, which is why it's lower than the Dairy Crest site, and taking it that much closer to the water table. It's struggling to deal with surface water at the moment, and that's with the amount of sunlight that it has to dry the ground. This situation that you can see there is going to exacerbate it tenfold, because it's going to be pretty much no sunlight, direct sunlight on that patio at all. I think it's important to note that this site needs to be developed. It is a derelict, it's an eyesore, and it needs something doing to it, irrespective of the fact that I think most of us agree that there's no proper vehicular access. We're not going to get around that. It does need to be developed, but it needs to be developed appropriately, and it needs to be developed sympathetically with regards to the neighbouring properties. 7A is now included within the Rayleigh Town Conservation Area because of the updated plan of 2010. Therefore, due regard has to be given to an impact on that property as well as other properties within the conservation area. I would strongly suggest that this property is too high. The development is still too high, and as a result is casting the overshadowing and it's overbearing. It's an overbearing bulk and mass. And Chairman, I would respectfully ask you and the committee to please reject it on the basis of the bulk and mass of the building at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dray.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I start by supporting the comments of Councillor Wilkinson, particularly with regards to 7A Crown Hill. My own feeling is that notwithstanding the information given to us regards to the addendum, I personally am still concerned regarding the overlooking and privacy issues of 7A Crown Hill and the overshadowing the garden area. In my view, Mr. Chairman, it would clearly cause a loss of amenity to the residents. Also, Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned and surprised that there are no further comments from Essex Highways, particularly following the latest site visit. My own feeling is that access and exit to and from the site will be difficult for vehicles, especially whilst turning right into the site from the High Street, and also bearing in mind the very close proximity to the mini roundabout at the junction of Eastwood Road and the High Street, sorry. Also, there's a recommendation, a planning recommendation, planning condition 3.58 on page 6.22. In my view, Mr. Chairman, that would not discourage ad hoc parking within the vehicular and pedestrian access to the site, particularly once the retail units become operative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With the screen I'm seeing, I've not noted any other non-members wishing to speak. Okay, right, we'll now move up the discussion on to members. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the agent and developer have really looked at our concerns on this. But my concern is the getting in and out of the properties that they're going to be built. I do agree that I think there's going to be too much overshadowing on it. And I've noted the parking spaces have gone to 2.9 times 5.5 metres, but there isn't one disabled space in it, which should be 3.6 minimum width. And they're my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I've got to ask, what happened to our, although we had a discussion with the officer on the plans, and we were supposed to be informed as to how that was progressing and what they was going to do. I'm a bit annoyed to find out that I haven't been told, and I don't think any of the committee have been told anything other than what is written down at the moment. And it's been a long time getting there. This is the last, almost the 11th hour when I got it and had to read through it, and it still didn't give me what I wanted. However, having said that, I do agree with Councillor Wilkinson. And also, I would like to know what provisions have been made for all the water that will end in the site, will be delivered in the site, and where it will go. That was one of my big questions, which I haven't found an answer to. So in that respect, and also the parking bays at the rear of the premises to Superdrug and snooker and what have you, there could be a misunderstanding there for the people that are going to use that facility in parking in areas where residents, where it's been put for residents. So if a resident comes back and he wants to put his car in that car space, he can't do so, and there could be repercussions on that. Also, the 2 parking spaces at the which is supposed to be the commercial premises on the, to the right of that drawing, they're not actually theirs to turn around and say they can park there. That is not their site, I do believe, unless the officer can tell me that it is their site and they have control over those 2 parking spaces. I don't believe they have. The site is only the dairy site, not the road, not those 2 spaces. So therefore, I don't think I can support this application. Thank you.
Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, I do support the comments made by all councillors so far. Although I do commend the developers for trying to actually address the concerns that we have, I still feel that we have an issue of bulk and mass. It is quite a bulky, although much improved design. My main concern, I like Councillor Lorraine Shaw and Chris Stanley, is with the parking. This shared parking area at the front does seem to me to be a bit of a recipe for disaster. When we as a committee visited the site there was a huge amount of congestion around the back there. Now, the amount of cars that were around there, I don't think that's going to reduce. Now, we're saying that there will be an issue that goes with the planning application, where there will be mitigation for parking in the approach road there. But I'm not sure how they can do that because it's not adopted. So the council certainly has no way of actually monitoring that. And certainly Councillor Stanley's point about the shared spaces being not available should the residents come back is a serious issue. I do, although, as I say, I do think that the developers have done well to try to address the issues that we've raised. I don't think they've done enough. So at the moment, I'm afraid I still can't support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of points really. It's picking up on the point that Councillor Wilkinson made. When we visited there, it's true that it was a bright sunny day, and it actually during a period of little rain, and I was surprised how damp it was. And so my question is, from a legal point of view, if we were to approve this, and it's likely that the overshadowing would be greater, we would be exacerbating that problem. So where would we stand on that? Is there any legal requirement for us to take that into account? And the other point, which was made by Councillor Dray, which was the overlooking, I just wanted confirmation from Katie Rogers whether there is no possibility of any of the properties overlooking 6A. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things, actually. I actually quite like this development. I think it would be very nice for where it is, because it's a very bad site at the moment. But I've just got a couple of questions. There seems very good report done by the officers, but there just seems to be a couple of things missing. It says, in Katie's, what she said earlier, the parking management strategy. I haven't seen that anywhere. I can't find it in the reports on the addendums. I don't know if I've missed it. So I'd like some more information on what that actually means and how it can be implemented. And also the water runoff. It's saying on the report that the water is going to be reduced to 2.5 litres per minute, I think it's minute or second, from between 9 and 30 litres. That's great for controlling that water, but it also says Essex County Council and SUDS are asking for more information on the water falling on the roofs runoff. Now, that seems to be more uncontrolled, and if that's being more uncontrolled, that will cause the dampness to 7A. Whereas, as I was saying before, any strategy to get most of the water actually in the direction is really good. Just like to know how what happens with that water, because no report's gone in yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like a little bit of guidance from officers on policy, please, with regards from both either Rochford District Council's policy and national policy on the right to light and overshadowing. I can't recall what the national or local policy is on that. So could I have some clarification on that, please, Chairman?
Okay, thank you. We'll sum these up in a second. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a couple of things I'd like to ask Katie in regards to this planned development. We had a photograph of the wall, the boundary wall, and I wondered whether that wall is going to be retained in its entirety along the boundary, or whether it's going to be modified in some way or another. And also from the diagram showing the plan for the development, it seems that there is at one point of the building is very close to the boundary edge, and I wondered if Katie could be able to inform us as to how close the building is to the edge of the boundary line and therefore to that wall. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. It does seem to me that the developers in this have done everything that we've asked them to do. I suspect that the water situation will be improved with this development, in as much that the surface water will go down into the surface water drains as opposed to running down the hill. Parking is, as far as I can see, is not really our concern. That's up to the up to the residents to organise, I guess, a parking company to look after that for them. And I would like to say that I will fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gooding.
I just wondered if Katie would be able to clarify when they're the balconies, are they overlooking the sites, or are they just balconies for show? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've got no other members indicating at the moment. A variety of points have been made, but in particular, the argument around shadow and light has taken prominence. So, Katie, could I ask you to sum up the various points and questions that have been met, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Bear with me. I'm just going to get the layout plan on screen. Sorry. Bear with me. Right, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so what you should see on screen is the proposed layout plan. So I'm going to take your comments in reverse order. I think it might just be easiest for me. So Councillor Gooding mentioned some clarity around balconies and overlooking. So I could bring up I'm happy to bring up the elevations of both to give you sort of more sort of certainty where the balconies are. But let me show you on this plan first, because this gives you, you know, an indication of where the balconies are in relation to boundaries, and then for potential overlooking to 7A. So on this building here where my cursor is, we have balconies here on this elevation at first floor, and on this elevation here at first floor. So views out from each of these balconies, so the views from here would be directed in this direction, and the side of the balcony is enclosed by part of the wall to the elevation. So if you were on this balcony here, you would not be getting a view, you know, back into the windows of 7A. Equally here, you know, again, you've got an enclosing part of the wall to the balcony. So there's no opportunity for looking in that direction, and your views will be directed over this central green space here. Again, that's the same for the balconies that extend further away from the boundary with 7A, and so they're on this elevation here indicated with my cursor, and then again in this location here. So the balcony which caused the most, I guess, concern during the course of the application was the one to the first floor in this flat here where my cursor is. And that particular balcony would be treated with this louvre detail, and it would extend all the way across. So when you're stood on this balcony here, you would not be able to view in this direction where my cursor is indicating, over to 7A. Your view would be directed across the site in this direction because of the positioning of these louvres. So you'd still get light into the balcony, so it would still be a space that could be utilised by any potential occupier, but it would not allow for this overlooking here. Hope that clarifies that balcony issue. In relation to the layout plan and Councillor Hookway's comments about the proximity of this building to this boundary. So it's at this point here that the building would be closest to the boundary, and that is a distance of about 1.5 metres, increasing to 4 metres separation in this area here. I won't bring up the photo of the wall again, unless anybody particularly needs me to, but there is a condition requiring that the boundary wall is retained. If there is any requirement during construction for it to be demolished, it must be, a boundary wall must be re-erected to the same height, and that would be required to be agreed by the council. But I envisaged, and it is proposed, that this existing boundary wall is retained. Councillor Steptoe, in terms of guidance on policy in relation to right to light and overshadowing. So we have a policy which talks about a 45-degree angle, I think, which members will be familiar with. But what that is designed to do, so if you imagine this is a terrace of residential properties and you were proposing a 2-storey rear extension here, you would take a 45-degree angle from the ground floor window on the elevation in this direction, and if the rear extension breached that, we would have concerns. So whilst we have a supplementary planning guidance sort of policy relating to that 45-degree angle in terms of acceptable or unacceptable overshadowing, that just relates to kind of proposed rear extensions where properties are in line with one another. And that doesn't, you know, give us reference for this situation here. What we can go to is guidance in the Essex Design Guide, which talks about appropriate levels of daylight to an existing property as a result of new development. And the Essex Design Guide is clear that it's a 25-degree angle we're talking about, taken at a 0.2 metres above ground level on the property to be considered. And this diagram here, this section diagram on screen, is what the applicant has provided to demonstrate that this building here would not breach that 45-degree angle. So in terms of a policy reference, in terms of appropriate daylight to the windows in the rear elevation of this property, the proposal would meet the requirement. In relation to overshadowing, there are no specific local or national requirements that talk about limits that are acceptable or unacceptable in relation to overshadowing. So it's accepted, yes, that this building is going to cause some degree of overshadowing to this, you know, this space here. So most of this area here where my cursor is a patio. We've seen in the photographs as well to the rear of number 7A. And then there's an area of lawn where my cursor is here. So some overshadowing will result. There's no policy guidance to sort of define a set limit that's unacceptable. And what we need to do in consideration of the impacts is consider sort of things in the round. So it wouldn't be the case that this area would be overshadowed at all times of the year, but yes, there would be some overshadowing and it would change the situation that they currently experience. What we've borne in mind is the fact that this property does benefit from a very substantial garden. So when we look at general acceptability in terms of impacts of overshadowing, we're sort of taking a view in relation to all the factors. And if this was their only area of garden, that would be, a more severe impact than the situation, which is that they have a garden which extends here and all the way to the front of the property. It's quite an unusual plot in that it's a detached property in the town centre, set in very spacious grounds. And the area to the front garden, somewhat unusually, because usually front gardens are lack privacy because they're on a street frontage, but that's not the case here. So the other areas of this property's garden would not be affected to the same extent as this area here. So that's what we bear in mind. I hope that's given you something, but in summary, there is no sort of technical limit in terms of the acceptability of overshadowing. Councillor Efty talked about water runoff, and it's right to say that in the report there was a holding objection from the Leeds Local Flood Authority because the applicant hadn't provided all the detail that the SUDS team require in relation to treatment of water off the roof. So the SUDS team are satisfied that all the water from the site would, and I'll go back to the layout plan. Oh, I don't know. Well, I'm going to go, sorry, bear with me. I don't know why it does that. Let's see if it can. Apologies. Right, hopefully we'll get the layout plan back. So in terms of the surface water drainage strategy, the only outstanding point that the SUDS team did have was with the treatment of the water, and that's to sort of make sure that it's going through permeable paving, essentially, where it meets, so to reduce pollutants, if you like. But in terms of the actual water, all of the water from the site would be dealt with by way of being directed to an attenuation tank. And that attenuation tank would be underneath the ground at approximately this point here, where the sort of vehicle access runs underneath this building. So all of the water would be attenuated to the tank, and then all of the runoff would be controlled at the controlled rates that were set out in the report. So there would be betterment to the situation in relation to surface water drainage. Yeah, all of the water would be taken and dealt with. So in that respect, I think this might deal with some of the other issues we had with relation to the overshadowing and the impacts in terms of groundwater. The site's going to be provided with a surface water drainage strategy, attenuation tank, controlled surface water runoff rate, which would improve the situation. And I don't think there would be a ground to refuse an application in relation to an overshadowing impact and the effect that that might have on the time it would take for land to dry out in relation to 7A. Right, now we're going back to...
I also asked about the parking strategy, Katie.
Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor Efty, sorry, the parking strategy, yes. So there isn't a parking management strategy submitted or set out. So what we have acknowledged is that there are here, can you see my cursor here? Yes, so because of the layout, you know, people, I think, would be discouraged from blocking in formally designated bays when this site is developed, because at the moment people, yes, park in an ad hoc basis down this turning head because this is a backland site and nobody is accessing it, nobody's around there, and nobody's sort of controlling this situation in any way. Once this site is developed I think there will be a disincentive for people to park, blocking in what is a designated bay, and there may well be signage put up as well. So I think that the layout of the site designs out the problem here. It doesn't, the layout, deal with the fact that people sometimes park here and partly over the pavement and in the street. So what the Section 106 heads of terms will require is not only the resurfacing of this, but a parking management strategy to be agreed. Now, that may well be, in this particular area here, some signage and some markings on the road in particular here to say no parking. And that would be controlled by, you know, it would be a private managed strategy. So, you know, like what happens in sort of private areas with clamping and fines, etc. But you're right, it wouldn't be the adopted highway authority and the local parking partnership controlling this. It would be private, but there would be a requirement for this strategy to be developed and agreed in the 106 agreement. And the applicant has already been in discussions with the owners of the access to talk about those requirements. And the owners would be required to sign up to the 106 as well.
Katie, could I just interrupt, Chairman?
I don't
Hold on a
think
second.
I've dealt with everything just yet. Bear with me. I'm just looking back at my notes. There was shared parking. I think there were some comments with regard to where water is going. Hopefully I've addressed those. They are at paragraphs 3.75 and 3.76 of the report in relation to surface water drainage. And there would be some conditions imposed. It wasn't timely for the addendum, but the lead local flood authority have now accepted that the outstanding requirement in terms of just the treatment of the water, and really that's a requirement that it, when it falls off the roof, it go through some permeable paving before it then enter the attenuation tank, because it's introducing more layers of treatment to that water before it goes into the drains. They're satisfied that that can be achieved, so they're happy to look at the impose the conditions.
Councillor Shaw had mentioned a disabled bay.
Yeah, sorry, there are some disabled bays. Hopefully you can see those in the centre of the site here. So the additional width is provided to each side and to the into the rear.
Thank you. I think I've ticked off virtually everything. Members, we've had a detailed presentation tonight. We've had 2 site visits. We had the benefit of a previous meeting where this was discussed in detail. The planning application is the planning application. For one reason or another, you may or may not like some of the issues, but I do believe that we have had more than enough information to help us make a decision about whether it is appropriate for planning a planning permission to be given or not on this application. Are there any fresh points that any members have got to make on this, rather than just restating the points that we've already got?
Chairman, may I speak, please?
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you. Just to reiterate what Katie has said, when it goes into the attenuation tank, where does it go from there? And also the parking, I don't believe has been settled. And until that parking area is settled, I don't think, I personally, that I don't think it's going to be a viable area for
yes, you've made that point. I'm not sure the
Yes,
direction of the flow of the drainage.
Where is the water going from when it goes into the attenuation tank?
We wouldn't
as it's
normally
been
have
expressed by
okay, thank you, Mr. Stanley.
Councillor Williams, it's going to go into the rain or the water ductwork or whatever. I don't believe it does.
I don't think it is appropriate that that we need to know the actual direction of flow. The site exists, the drainage exists, there's attenuation to the existing. I'll just give Katie time to just give an answer to that before we move on.
No, it's only just, Chairman, that where it goes from there, that's the point. If it goes into the ground, then 7A will be absolutely flooded for a long period of time. Thank you.
Okay, to confirm, the water from the site will be collected in an attenuation tank, and that water will then go to a public surface water sewer at a controlled rate, not
Right.
to the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Right, members, there is a recommendation for approval printed on 6.1 going through to 6.7 with some informatives. There is information on the addendum. There's information regarding the removal of condition 17, which would mean there's a section 106 agreement in place that would need to be agreed prior to first occupation. So all in all, I believe we're in a position to now go to the vote. Katie, could you stop sharing, please? Then I can properly see all the members as we go through the next stage. Okay, then. So as per usual, members, I'll ask you whether you're in favour or not of the recommendation, and also if you want a recorded vote. But just before we start the process, can I just double check that no one has been cut off or missed any elements of the discussion before we make a decision? Okay. Right, here we go then. Councillor Butcher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't need a recorded vote and I approve.
Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. No recorded vote and I for approval, please.
Thank you. Councillor Eaves.
Recorded vote and against the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gooding.
No recorded vote and approve the development. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway.
Recorded vote and against.
Councillor Ianu.
Recorded vote and against.
Thank you. Councillor Merrick.
No recorded vote and for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Shaw.
Sorry, no recorded vote and against.
Councillor Stanley.
A recorded vote and against, due to the fact we didn't approve of it last time because of overshadowing.
Councillor Stanley, I just need to know yes or no. Can you just confirm for or against?
Against and recorded, please.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
No recorded vote and approve.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. No recorded vote and for the approval.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Recorded vote and against, Chairman.
Thank you. Nearly forgot myself. No recorded vote and for. I believe that is carried 7-6. Can you just confirm that, Sonia? Yeah, okay, thank you. That item is approved. Next, we have land fronting car park access, Bellingham Lane, Rayleigh.
Chairman, with your permission, I'm going to leave the meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Katie, I believe you're going to present on this one again, please.
Sorry, yes, thank you. Just share my screen. So members should see on screen a location plan. So this application is for the installation of a rapid electric vehicle charging point. The equipment is proposed to be installed on part of the pedestrian footway adjacent to the carriageway on Bellingham Lane. Take you to the layout plan. So the equipment would be sited, so this top plan is an aerial image with 2 parking bays superimposed, and just in a very faint red, but where my cursor is here, this is the proposed location of the equipment. So the equipment will be sited some 5.7 metres from this end of the central island and close to the edge of the footway. The concrete base is shown with the white in here. So the bottom diagram is the same pedestrian island with the drop curb where my cursor is here, and this is the area of proposed installation of equipment. So the white area is the concrete base. The rectangular area here is the proposed charging unit, and this other rectangular shape to the side is the feeder pillar. So a gap of 1.75 metres of the pedestrian footway would be retained behind the equipment, and the intention is that vehicles would park in these 2 bays on the carriageway to use the charging point. I'll just take you to the next plan. So the charging unit is shown in the top right hand corner of the plan on the screen here where my cursor is. This is the front elevation, and then this is the side elevation. So the unit would have a height of 1.8 metres and a width of 41 centimetres. And the feeder pillar is shown in the bottom right hand corner of the plan and would have a height of 1.2 metres and a width of 1 metre. If I take you back to, bear with me, the location plan. So this area of Bellingham Lane up to the junction with London Hill to the north and extending south along High Street is within Rayleigh Conservation Area. There are no nationally listed buildings close to the application site, but number 20 to 22 High Street, which is in this area here, is locally listed and backs onto Bellingham Lane opposite the application site. There is a landscaped pedestrian space to the west of the site from which the proposed equipment would be visible. However, the backdrop, when viewed from the open space, would be towards the rear of premises which front the High Street, and it's the frontage of these premises that hold the most value in terms of character and appearance of the conservation area. The rear elevations of these buildings do not make a positive contribution. I'll show you some street scenes, so if we just skip past the 2 plans I've already shown you. So the first is a street scene of the application site and immediate surrounding area. In this first image, the central island is here, and you can see the rear of the premises that front the High Street and the green space to the right hand side. The proposed equipment would be installed on the central island approximately adjacent to where the red car in the image is parked, with 2 proposed parking bays either side of this. And then the second image is viewed northwards along Bellingham Lane, and the silver car where the cursor's pointing is approximately adjacent to where the equipment would be installed. The carriageway in this location is some 6.6 metres in width, and space would therefore be retained on the carriageway adjacent to the proposed parking bay, sufficient for a delivery lorry, refuse lorry to pass. The proposal would introduce features which would not be of any particular design merit. However, given the location, it is considered that the proposal would not result in unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. Space for pedestrians to use the central island would still be retained with the proposed equipment in place, and there is no objection to the proposed harm from the Highways Authority. The proposal would be of benefit in terms of encouraging use of electric vehicles, which would be of benefit to air quality and which has been poor in the locality. The High Street is currently designated as an air quality management area, and so this would help this situation. The recommendation is one of approval, subject to the recommended conditions and a legal agreement to require the applicant to pay for a traffic regulation order relating to the proposal and the bays within the carriageway.
Thank you. Katie, can I just ask you to just make it absolutely clear about the content of this application? the application being for the charging points and the status of the proposed parking bays that would be consequential that go with this, please.
Yeah, so you wouldn't need planning permission to put the parking bays in the highway, but it would be a matter that would have to be addressed by a traffic regulation order separate to the planning consent if granted. So the planning consent itself is actually for the physical works of putting this concrete base into the footway. The concrete base is the larger rectangle with this central rectangular charging point in it, the feeder pillar alongside. There's a signage pillar denoted by that circle here, and just above you can see what the sign's going to say. And then there is 2 bollards just protecting the feeder pillar adjacent to the carriageway. So it's these works within the footway that are the subject of the application.
Thank you. I haven't noted any of our non-members indicating at this point. So therefore we'll move straight on to the members side of the debate. This is Councillor Stanley first.
Thank you, Chair. Katie, just a couple of little questions, really. I notice you've got 4, well, at the moment there are double yellow lines, so you can't park down there. Are we then going to have parking bays? That is, I think you showed 4 parking bays, 2 of which will be electric. But then if there is a delivery lorry adjacent to those parking bays, how is traffic going to get through? Would it not be wiser, and I put this down as a helpful hint, is to make the parking bays half road, half on that?
Councillor Stanley, can I stop you there, please?
The reason I'm going to ask another question. Just get this other
if you
one
can
in.
just stop there, please, Councillor Stanley. The officers just made it clear that the application that is in front of us is for an electric charging point. The parking bays are a separate issue.
Yes, I know.
And what it is for us to do, I just need to be clear on this.
I just wanted to get.
Councillor Stanley, please.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And the planning application is the planning application. That is what we're determining. It is not for us to make suggestions about what the applicant, whether it be RDC or not, might like to do at some future stage. We must focus on the planning application before us.
Yeah,
and that is specifically charging points.
I realise
I must direct you to focus your argument, please.
Yes. It's just that I don't want to find ourselves kicking us up the backside when it's in the wrong place. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of items, just clarification. First of all, does there need to be any archaeological issues with regards to this, because of where this is quite close to the Rayleigh Mount? That was my first question. Now, where the electrical units will stand, looking at the picture there of the red car, the units are going to be a little way into the pavement area. They won't be right up against the curb edge, and then cables will be run from that those units to the vehicles. What will there be to stop pedestrians walking between the parked vehicle and the charger unit where the cables will be run? Perhaps, I'm thinking of somebody that is perhaps blind, perhaps is not so good at sight, or people just not paying attention in between the vehicle and the charger unit on the pavement.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in, Katie, can you answer this? Am I right in saying that Essex County Council Highways have got no issues with this, please? Because it hasn't been mentioned and I might have missed it in the report. Thank you.
Okay. I haven't got any other members indicating at the moment, so if you wouldn't mind dealing with those questions, please.
Okay, so in reverse order, Essex County Council Highways do not object to this application. So they're happy in principle with it. In terms of Councillor Steptoe's concern about the actual charging sort of connections and trailing, so if this, let me just zoom in to this, just bring this down. I think this diagram is possibly clearer than the image. Okay, so hopefully you can see this is a zoomed in section of the layout. So the white rectangle that, as my cursor is just sort of going around, is going to be a concrete base on which the feeder unit will sit, and the actual connections would come out of this side, so the carriageway side of the charging unit, and then you plug in to the car. So there isn't any proposal for any sort of bollards or railing around the back of the unit. But if I go back then to, let me just go to, I think it's plan 3, this plan, you'll see that the actual, it's on the front of the unit, that the kind of, I can't think of the word, but the plug-in, the sort of cable would come out at the front of the unit. So I don't think there would be a chance of it sort of trailing behind the unit, and it's the area behind the unit that would be the area maintained for pedestrians to walk along this central island. In terms of archaeological issues, we haven't had any consultation response to say that any works are required. I don't think that the works are, well, they're kind of quite small scale. So I do understand the proximity of kind of known historical assets, but we haven't had a response from Essex County Council to say that they require any archaeological work before this development's carried out.
Thank you. And that depth from the back of the charger to the road, I think I read it 1750 millimetres.
Chairman, could I come back on?
Yes, Councillor Steptoe.
Yeah, Katie, could you enlarge that bottom section of the drawing again around where the charger unit is, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. I'm not sure if I made myself completely clear. I accept the fact that to the top of the picture where it says 1500 to there, that area there is not going to have any cables trailing across, and that will be open pavement. My concern was where the little arrow is there, that area there, if the whole thing is going to be on a plinth and there will be cables coming from the front of that unit going at diagonal angles to the two vehicles parked there, what is there to stop a pedestrian that's perhaps has difficult seeing or is blind, or just somebody not paying attention, being able to walk between the charger unit and where that yellow box is? What will be stopping that there happening? And again, if it's on a plinth, there'll be a step there as well.
So, so if you were coming from this direction, so from the north and going along this area, there's a bollard here. Okay, so there's a bollard here, and then this in total is 750. So the space between there to actually go around that bollard, you'd have to sort of, it'd be quite difficult to maneuver around there. So I think the bollard would be sufficient to stop people from going in front of the unit from that side. And then on this side, you've not only got a bollard here, but you've got this feeder unit as well, that's positioned to the side. So if you like, that would be, you know, well, maybe not visible if you're visually impaired, but you would come across this feeder unit before you sort of tripped over any hazard. And I don't think it's now fairly narrow. I don't think people would be walking across this frontage.
So I do still have a concern about impaired people being able to, with trailer cables there, to be for it to be of a concern. I would like to have seen something a little bit more positive than Bollard.
I mean, it is a council application. So whether or not it's a comment or an informative we could put on, if members were minded to approve, to recommend that, you know, considerations given to additional kind of, you know, treatment to mean that people can't, you know, get through this front area potentially.
I think that's eminently sensible.
Yeah, but could I just make a suggestion there that perhaps if this application is approved, that the applicant discusses that particular issue with the organisation, the blind organisation, I can't think what it's called, the acronym for it, the Royal Society for Blind, just to make sure that that is going to be acceptable.
Of course. Members, the recommendation for approval is printed on 7.1 and 7.2. If you wouldn't mind stopping sharing again, Katie, so as I can see everyone's screen. I'll just, members, confirm that you've all heard all of the information. No one's lost anything part way through. So you're in a position to carry out the vote. So we shall begin. So as usual,
Chairman, does that include that informative?
With the informative, as we've highlighted with reference to the blind organisation.
Councillor Smith, Councillor Stanley is indicating.
Yes, Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. Does this could Katie clarify a little pointer? Will the yellow line still be there or not? Thank you.
I've got to intervene there. The yellow lines are a highways issue, not part of the planning application. Okay. So if you members, you would indicate whether you wish to have a recorded vote and then whether you are for or against the application. Councillor Butcher.
Yes, thank you. No recorded vote and for the application.
Councillor FD.
No recorded vote and for the application, please.
Councillor Eaves.
No recorded vote and for the application.
Councillor Gooding.
No recorded vote and for the application. Thank
Councillor
you.
Hookway.
A recorded vote and against.
Councillor Arno.
No recorded vote and for.
Councillor Merrick.
No and for.
Councillor Shaw.
No and for.
Councillor Stanley.
Recorded vote and against.
Councillor Steptoe.
No and for the application.
Councillor Williams.
Mr. Chairman, no and for the application.
Councillor Wilson.
No and for, Chairman.
And myself, no and for. That application is approved. Thank you very much for that one, members. Item 8, St John Fisher Recreation Ground, Little Weekly Chase, Rayleigh. Katie is again presenting for us. Thank you.
I'll just share my screen with you now. So this application is for the siting of a storage container on part of a recreation ground. The site of the proposed container is edged red on the location plan. Just my cursor is pointing at the site now, positioned towards the northern boundary. The proposed container would be of standard design and some 6 meters in length by 2.3 meters in width. It would be painted dark green. So this photograph is a view towards that part of the site on which the container is proposed to be sited. The photo shows the area where the container would be sited in more detail in the next image. This is just further in, and it would be adjacent, just adjacent to the edge of this car parking area and extending close to this boundary of the site here. The site is within the green belt. However, the container would be required in relation to use of the wider site for outdoor recreation as a storage facility in relation to use of the site as football pitches. In this regard, the proposal would therefore be considered appropriate development within the green belt. The size of the proposed container would not be considered excessive for the proposed use. There's no concern in relation to any other issues of residential amenity, and the recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to the recommended conditions.
Thank you. I'm not noting any non-members wishing to speak. I'm not even noting any members wishing to speak. Therefore, we'll go straight to the vote. As Councillor Stanley, have you indicated? Yeah.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chairman. Is the proposed site going to be on the green part of the? Are we talking about on that green portion of land on the side?
I don't know if I'm muted or not. Let me just. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. Let me share my screen again.
I thought you'd just shown us fairly
So
effectively.
sorry for clarity. So what you can see is the red line here with the cursor around it. That's the proposed container, and then this line here, the sort of grey dashed line, is the extent of the sort of car parking area. So it's on the grassed area. So in this image, it's just beyond that bin there, and it's in this area and extending up to the boundary. So it's on the grass.
Okay, right. Thank you. So that's clear for everyone. So there's a recommendation printed on 8.1 and a little bit on 8.2. Everyone is fully informed, has heard the presentation and is ready to vote. If you could just stop sharing again, please. Thank you. As usual, whether you'd like a recorded vote and whether you're for or against the proposal. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. No recorded vote and for the proposal.
Councillor FD.
No recorded vote and for the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Eaves.
For, thank you.
Sorry, I missed that, Councillor Eaves.
No and for.
Thank you. Councillor Gooding.
No recorded vote and for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
No recorded vote and for.
Thank you. Councillor Yarnu.
No recorded vote and for.
Councillor Merrick. Thank you.
No and for.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
No and for. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Stanley.
No and for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
No and for.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. That's no and for.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
No and for, Chairman.
Myself, no and for. That is a unanimous approval for that application. There are no items referred from the weekly list. So at 8:58, that brings us to the end. Thank you very much, members.